Mr. Casey, freeing his arm from his holders, suddenly bowed his head on his hands with a sob of pain. "Poor Parnell," he cried loudly. "My dead king." He sobbed loudly and bitterly. Stephen, raising his terror-stricken face, saw that his father's eyes were full of tears. The fellows talked together in little groups. One fellow said, "They were caught near the Hill of Lions." "Who caught them?" "Mr. Gleason and the minister. They were on a car." The same fellow added, "A fellow in a higher line told me." Fleming asked, "But why did they run away? Tell us." "I know why," Cecil Thunder said. "Because they had faked cash out of the rector's room." "Who faked it?" "Kickham brother. And they all went share in it." "But that was stealing. How could they have done that?" "A fat lot you know about it, Thunder." "Well said. I know why they scut." "Tell us why." "I was told not to," Wells said. "Oh, go on, Wells," all said. "You might tell us. We won't let it out." Stephen Bird furrowed his head to hear. Wells looked around to see if anyone was coming, then he said secretly, "You know the other wine they keep in a press in a sacristy?" "Yes." "Well, they drank that, and it was found out who did by the smell. And that's why they ran away, if you want to know." And the fellow who had spoken first said, "Yes, that's what I heard too from the fellow in a higher." The fellows were all silent. Stephen stood among them, afraid to speak, listening. A faint sickness of awe made him feel weak. How could they have done that? He thought of a dark, silent sacristy. They were dark wooden presses. There were the creamed surplices lay quietly folded. It was not the chapel, but still you had to speak under your breath. It was a holy place, he remembered. The summer evening he had been there to be dressed as a boat-bearer, the evening of the procession to the little altar in a wood. A strange and a holy place. The boy that held the censer had swung it gently to and fro near the door with the silvery cap lifted by a middle chain to keep the coals lighting. That was called charcoal, and it had burned quietly as a fellow had swung it gently and had given off a weak sour smell. And then when all were rested, he had stood holding out the boat to the rector, and the rector had put a spoonful of incense in, and it had hissed on the red coals. The fellows were talking together in little groups, here and there on a playground. The fellows seemed to him to have grown smaller. That was because of the sprinter had knocked him down the day before. A fellow off of the second grammar. He had been thrown by a fellow machine lightly off a cinder path, and his spectacles had been broken in 3 pieces, and some of the grit of the cinders had gone into his mouth. That was why the fellows seemed to him smaller and farther away, and the goalposts too thin and far, and the soft grey sky so high up. But there was no play on a football ground, for cricket was coming. And some said the barn nest would be proof, and some said it would be flowers. And all over the playgrounds they were playing rounders and bowling twisters and lobs. And from here and from there came the sounds of the cricket bats through the soft grey air. They said, pick-pack, poke-pock, little drops of water in a fountain slowly falling in a brimming bowl. Athy, who had been silent, said quietly, "You all are wrong." All turned toward him eagerly. "Why? Do you know?" "Who told you? Tell us, Athy." Athy pointed across the playground to where Simon Moonan were walking by himself, kicking a stone before him. "Ask him," he said. The fellow looked there and then said, "Why him? Is he in it?" Athy lowered his voice and said, "Do you know why those fellows scout?" "I will tell you, but you must not let on you know." "Tell us, Athy, go on. You might if you know." He paused for a moment and then said mysteriously, "They were caught with Simon Moonan and Tusker Boyle in a square one night." The fellow looked at him and asked, "Caught? What doing?" Athy said, "Smugging." All the fellows were silent, and Athy said, "And that's why." Stephen looked at the faces of the fellow, but they were all looking across the playground. He wanted to ask somebody about it. What did that mean about the smuggling in a square? Why did the 5 fellows out of the higher line run away from that? It was a joke, he thought. Simon Moonan had a nice clothes, and one night he had shown him a ball of the creamy sweet that fellow of football 15 had rolled down to him, lying the carpet in the middle of the refectory when he was at the door. It was the night of the match against the Beckley Rangers, and a ball was made just like a red and a green apple, only it opened and it was full of the creamy sweets. And one day Boyle had said that an elephant had 2 tuskers instead of a 2 tusk, and that was why he was called Tusker Boyle. But some fellow called him Lady Boyle because he was always at his nail paring them. Ellen had a long, thin, cool white hands too, because she was a girl. They were like ivory, only soft. That was the meaning of Tower of Ivoli, but Protestant could not understand it and made fun of it. One day he had stood beside her looking into the huddle ground. A waiter was running up a trail of bunting on a flagstaff, and a fox terrier was scampering and through of the sunny lawn. She had put her hand into his pocket where his hand was, and he had felt how cool and thin and soft her hand was. She had said the pockets were a funny thing to have. And then all of a sudden she had broken away and had run laughing down the sloping curve of a path. Her fair hair had streamed out behind her like a gold in a sun. Tower of ivory, house of gold. By thinking of the things you could understand them. But why in a square? You went there when you wanted to do something. It was all like slabs of slate and water trickled all day out of tiny pinholes, and there was a queer smell of stale water there. And behind the door of one of the closets there was a drawing in a red pencil of a bearded man in a Roman dress with a brick in each hand, and underneath was the name of a drawing. Balbus was building a wall. Some fellow had drawn it there for a coat. It had a funny face, but it was very like a man with a beard. And on the wall of another closet there was a written in a backhand in a beautiful writing. Julius Caesar wrote the calico belly. Perhaps that was why they were there, because it was a place where some fellow wrote things for code. But all the same, it was queer what Arthur said and the way he said it. It was not a code because they had run away. He looked with the other across the playgrounds and began to feel afraid. At least, Fleming said, and we are all to be punished for what other fellow did. I won't come back. See if I do, Cecil Thunder said. 3 days silence in a refectory and sending us up for 6 and 8 every minute. Yes, said Wells. And old Barrett has a new way of twisting the note so that you can't open it and fold it again to see how many fairly you are to get. I won't come back to. Yes, said Cecil Thunder. And a prefect of studies was in a second of the grammar this morning. Let us get up rebellion, Fleming said. Will we? All the fellows were silent. The air was very silent, and you could hear the cricket bath, but more slowly than before. Pick-pock. Wells asked, what is going to be done to them? Simon Moonan and Tusker are going to be flogged, Athis said. And the fellow in a higher line got their choice of flogging or being expelled. And which are they taking? Asking the fellow who had spoken first. All are taking explosion except Corrigan, Athie answered. He is going to be flogged by Mr. Gleason. I know why, Cecil Thunder said. He is right, and the other fellow are wrong, because a flogging wears off after a bit, but a fellow that has been expelled from a college is known all his life on account of it. Besides, Gleason won't flog him hard. It's best of his play not to, Fleming said. I won't like to be Simon Moonan and a Tusker, Cecil Thunder said, but I don't believe they will be flogged. Perhaps they will be sent up for twice 9. No, said Athie. They'll both get it on a vital spot. Wells rubbed himself and said in a crying voice, Please, sir, let me off. Athie grinned and turned up the sleeves of his jacket, saying, It can be helped. It must be done. So down with your breeches, and out with your bum. The fellow laughed, but he felt that they were a little afraid. In a silence of soft grey air he heard the cricket bats from here and from there. Pock. That was a sound to hear, but if you were hit, then you would feel a pain. The pansy bat made a sound too, but not like that. The fellow said it was made of the whalebone and leather with a lid inside. And he wondered what was the pain like. There were different kinds of sounds. A long, thin cane would have a high whistling sound, and he wondered what was the pain like. It made him shivery to think of it, and cold. And what had he said too? But what was there to laugh at in it? It made him shivery. But that was because you always felt like a shiver when you let down your trousers. It was the same in a bath when you undressed yourself. You wondered who had to let them down, the master or a boy himself. Oh, how could they laugh about it that way? He looked at his rolled up sleeves and knuckly, inky hands. He had rolled up his sleeves to show how Mr. Gleason would roll up his sleeves. But Mr. Gleason had round, shiny cuffs and a clean white wrist and fattish white hands, and the nails of them were long and pointed. Perhaps he paired them to like Lady Boyle. But they were terribly long and pointed nails. So long and cruel they were thought the white fetish hands were not cruel but gentle. And thought he trembled with cold and affright to think of a cruel long nails, and of the high whistling sound of the cane, and of the chill you felt at the end of your shirt when you understand yourself. Yet he felt a feeling of queer, quiet pleasure inside him to think of the wild fetish hands, clean and strong and gentle. And he thought of what Cecil Thunder had said, that Mr. Gleason would not flog Corrigan hard. And Fleming had said he would not, because it was the best of his play not to. But that was not why. A voice from far out of the playground cried, "All in!" And another voices cried, "All in, all in." During the writing lesson he sat with his arms folded, listening to the slow scraping of the pens. Mr. Harford went to and fro making little signs in a red pencil, and sometimes sitting beside the boy to show him how to hold his pen. He had tried to spell out the headline for himself, thought he knew already what it was, for it was the last of a book. Zeal without prudence is like a ship adrift. But the lines of the letters were like fine invisible threads, and it was only by closing his right eye tight and staring out of the left eye that he could make out of the full curves of the capital. But Mr. Harford was very decent and never got in a wax. The other master got in a dreadful waxes. But why were they to suffer for what fellows in a higher line did? Well had said that they had drunk some of the alder wine out of the press in a sacristy, and that it had been found out who had done it by smell. Perhaps they had stolen a monstraces to run away with it and sell it somewhere. That must have been a terrible scene, to go in there quietly at night, to open the dark press and steal the flashing gold thing into which God was put on the altar in the middle of flowers and candles at benediction. while the incense went up in a cloud at both sides as the fellow swung the censer, and Dominic Clee sang the first party by himself in the choir. This video is for Navi Daria page.